I'm just setting up everything in the room. Hold on. Alrighty. Hold on. So everything worked out. So I saw your message like after Shabbat. So everything worked out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, we made it home spot. I'm actually on the road now. I have to drive uh, about maybe about an hour and a half to go and pick up the right part because the part that I bought in the Dallas area before Shabbat, which was on Thursday.
Mm,
Um, it was so Thursday night. I go and I'm trying to drop the tank, and I dropped the tank, and they gave me the wrong fuel pump. And so,
mm.
yeah, so I was able to bring it back, return it to a location near me, but I have to drive over to Tyler, which is about another hour or so away, to get the right pump. They're the only ones that have it. So I'm on my way to go and take care of that now.
Wow.
So yeah, but I'm listening. I'm riding. I'm rolling.
So let me ask this: Did you guys? I mean, as we've been talking about. So did you guys see like any like miracles that happened like in that whole like situation?
Okay, all right. So that's the blessing, right? Baruch Hashem. Because the whole experience, uh, although it was difficult, there was so many blessings. There was so many blessings. Like when we first of all, the first blessing was that the vehicle stopped um, while we were coming out of natural groceries. Okay,
Mm,
so you got to realize that when we talk about a 2 hour drive on on the interstate, and we're going over bridges and turns, and then we in Dallas, and then just a bunch of turnpikes and all that. It could have stopped anywhere. It could have stopped on the freeway, but it
mm,
stopped in a location that was, I mean, a great location. If to work on a vehicle, we wasn't in a lot of traffic. We were able to get it over to the side. The second thing is that the the Jewish community was a blessing.
mm.
When I tell you a blessing, in that we prior to that we were at a grocery store, getting food for Shabbat, and we met a family that's actually from Israel that just got there,
Mm.
right? So when the van went down, I was talking to the young man that we met, and man, he called the Uber. Uber came to pick me up to go get a part,
Mm.
and by the time I came back, uh, man, just total blessing. Then all out the blue, we found out that there was that the Jewish community has a like a roadside service that they were trying to help us, with they
Wow.
couldn't help us because they didn't have the right equipment. So I went and bought the equipment that I needed to actually do the job. And so what ends up happening, it was just a blessing with that family from Israel. Then, also the community there, just trying to help us out. Well, a lady comes up and just out of the blue, and she says, "Hey, I want to bless you all." Okay, and so she gave us like a handful of money. That was a blessing, and a handful of money. And we're
Mm,
like, "Wow, Baruch Hashem."
mm,
And then another lady came over, second lady came over, and when we found out that I had the wrong pump, the this lady just pulls up out of the blue, and she's like, "Hey, listen, um, I just want to see how can I help, whatnot." And so we said, "Well, no, we'll be in the situation. We're gonna get the thing told, and we're gonna, try to figure out what our next step move is." And so this lady loaded up my family in our car, and she put us up in a hotel
wow.
for the night. The next morning, get up, and so I'm getting ready to get told, and I called an elder and another sister that actually lives where we live, and they came out to pick us up so that we can get the van towed so I can do all the work here near my home, right? Uh, but while we were at my wife, she had to go to the grocery store to still get some things that we needed for Shabbat. And I mean, listen, this brother comes up, Joshua, uh, and he's a part of the Jewish community. He's actually a part of the Jewish security force.
Mm.
And he's talking to my wife, my son, while they're at the store. He's like, man, whatever we can help, he calls up his mechanic, and he's like, listen, hey man, I can hear him on the phone. He's like, listen, this family, man, they're trying to get home for Shabbos, man. They're trying to get home for Shabbos. And but it was and so he ended up giving them another ride back to the hotel. But we made it home safely. Our van is home safely, and so everything is working out. Baruch Hashem. We made it home. The whole thing was a miracle. The whole trip was a miracle.
That's great. That's great. I mean that's it's just it's just like this whole month, right? Is the spirit of this month of Nisan is all about revealed miracles, right? And sometimes Hashem has to put us in a vulnerable situation where we have to ask for help, and then we can see all the bracha, all the brachot, like all the learning and all the mitzvahs and all these things that we do. We see how like all that energy comes and rescues us, right? And brings about people and brings about scenarios that we can see like, oh, okay, not only are we on the right path, but even in the future when we see different things that look like limitations or things that are whatever, we're able to we're able to see that. You know what I'm saying? We're able to see that relationship exists, and all of us are dealing with that. I was occupied a little bit on that Friday because a girl in our community passed away the night before, and so it was a big deal because this girl,
So
yeah, she didn't really have any family. She didn't really have. Anyway, so it was just like a whole thing, you know what I mean? And I knew you guys were dealing with stuff and other people. So, it's a time of humility, a time of vulnerability, and it's a good story. It's a good experience, and is that the community in Dallas you were dealing with? The community, was it the Dallas community or was it somewhere else?
yeah, my mic
Yeah, what were you
was
saying?
uh,
You're breaking up a little bit.
the Dallas Jewish.
Okay, the Dallas community. Okay, all right.
You
So
know?
yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. I mean, you broke up, but like for a
Yeah, it
second.
was it was the Dallas Jewish. And so I think there's maybe 4 or 5 synagogues that they have there.
Ah, okay. That's even more interesting. Okay, so but that's a good. I just either way, that's a good sign. It's a little bit about this girl. So so I in Jerusalem, like you run into a lot of people, you meet a lot of people, and you have experiences. And the thing that's interesting about Jerusalem is that it's just such an international community, and so you meet so many people that are just from all over the world. So this girl, I think, was like from like Poland or something like that, and it seems like she converted to Judaism. And I mean, I don't know details. It just sound like she just got ill. Just like people just get ill. They have like some like. She was a heavier set girl. She was a heavier set girl. She was a big girl, and so I just think I don't know. You don't know. You don't know what's going on. But either way, She's no longer with us, and her name is Abigail Batsera. So dedicating, all the classes, probably this whole month, for the rest of the month at least, which is only a few more days. But she's always going to be in mind. But right now, her soul's ascending and going to higher levels. So all the you know all the things that we do here are in her merit, in her name, and her experience and her inspiration is extra mitzvahs that are there in the heavens. But she was a very positive person and very charming. Like when the people that it's not like single guys, are always looking for a certain type of a look, whatever. But she didn't really fit that look, but she was like such a beautiful person that look didn't matter, and she was just like a person that everyone wanted to be around. And it's just such a shock. I think she was only 32 years old, and it's crazy. It's just crazy, and it's just I don't know. It's just a very important thing. So this is things. Okay, so with that being said, may this sure be in the merit of Abigail Batsera. She shall have the highest Aliyah in Shemayim. She shall have protection, and she just continually receive just additional support from all the positivity she left in this world. And we shall all merit to gain from that light that she left in the world, because the Torah tells us, the sages teach that when a person, leaves this world, you know, their souls in the upper places. We know, and the body decays, but that light that they created in the world is still here, right? That light that they created in the world is still here when that soul ascends. So we have ability to connect to that light. When we say, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, when we say those names, that light that our ancestors left, we have a direct connection to that. We talk about Moshe Rabbeinu, we talk about these experiences. All these things these souls were here and they're no longer here with us in their lights. Now, the thing is, we're going to have, like you guys had, Erev Shabbos, you guys had, your challenges. You guys are dealing with it. You guys are, by yourself, and you're on this whole journey, and you're driving, get kosher food, and hours away, and you're having car issues, and there's weather and all this type of stuff. But this is the vulnerability that our ancestors had, in the desert. This is the vulnerability. This is a taste of the vulnerability of being in the desert with no food. Being in a situation where you had to leave family members behind because you were so connected, to the truth, right? And moving forward. And so all of us are dealing with different types of vulnerabilities. Some were emotional, some were physical. But the point is saying that energy that the Torah is describing and what the Jewish people went through is a reflection of that particular light, right? Because every single day, like right between Pesach to Shavuot, we every single day, every single week has a specific revealment of light, because this time period is the umbilical cord, right? Between the baby and its provider, right? And so this whole process now is like we have to see it in our lives. I mean, I know we talk about it a lot, but when you have these types of experiences that you guys had Erev Shabbos and all these different things that went on, it's just an insight. It's just an insight to that vulnerability that makes us have to cry out to God and see, and not put a condition on how God should manifest it, but rather, knowing that He's manifesting it, right? And so, it's that type of a thing, and everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. The whole Jerusalem community is coming together and supporting this girl, and it's a big deal. So it's a very beautiful thing, and we've had so much death, in Israel, over the last year and a half. It's just been a really intense experience. So we're just like, God, no more, please. All right. So what we want to do is we want to be able to respond to these conditions that are going on, right? We want to be able to say, like, okay, this is how the universe is responding. and everything is for the good. Now, what's our job, right? What's our job, right? Like on Pesach, the Shem says, put the blood on your doorpost and go inside and don't come out. That was our job. And then Hashem did his job. So what is it now, right? And we're going to read in this week's Torah portion. But before we start this Torah portion, I want to talk a little bit about the antidote for this whole experience. Like because we're in a frame of spiritual technology, right? And so spiritual technology, is saying that there has to be. I'm trying to get this author that I want to bring him up. Hold on 1 second. So the author that we're gonna start this kind of like do this period of time because we want to be in the frame of responding, right, and being and being prepared, right, and so one of the main protection shields for this month, and we're going to read about it a little bit later, is this concept of evil speech. And so evil speech is a big part of this week's Torah portion, but it's not, we don't learn the Torah that way, right? We're not just learning the Torah like, okay, this is a random situation and the Torah is talking about it, it's in Leviticus, it's explaining the elevations of the things we got to live by. No, it's not that, because we know the Torah portion is connected to the seasons. The seasons are a reflection of the cosmos. The cosmos are a reflection of the heavens, right? The heavens are receiving the influence from the endless reality, the endless world, which is the Ein Sof, which is the creator itself, right? And so that cosmos and that effect on planet Earth and that effect of planet Earth's environment on our physicality, which affects our consciousness and everything, this is what we're dealing with. So as you're going to see in the Torah, it talks, this whole week is about, this Torah portion has a lot to do with this concept of Lashon Hara. Now, the thing is, don't learn it as this is something going on in the Torah that we should not do. Yes, that is a way to learn it, but there's even a higher way to learn it, right? The higher way of learning it is that the Torah is teaching us during this month of ER, right? Which is the sages teach is a month of healing. We're going to learn about that tomorrow. Okay, I'm just giving the tools first, and then we're going to go into what the opportunity is, because this is the month that the sages teach is the month of healing. And what does this mean, healing? Meaning that you have the head, which is, say, Nisan, Pesach. Then you have the body, which is ER, and then when you have the head, you have the body, meaning from like the upper body part, from the neck all the way to the waist, right? And then you have Sivan, which is, say the legs, right? We learned this graph, with Rav Ashlag a while ago. But the point is just saying that there's a body of spirituality that's being created. So the entity that connects the Exodus and connects receiving the Torah is this month of ER, right? And this month of ER is when we have to double down on restrictions. And there's specific restrictions, right? Well, and all the restrictions are valuable all the times. But this month, if we hold to these technologies to the best of our abilities, we will receive a tremendous amount of light every single day of the month of ER. Every single month of the day of year. And keep in mind, this is the second month of the year, right? Which in itself, that's a certain level, right? And so, anyway, so this author, and I was going to go a little bit into his life, the Chafetz Chaim, but we're going to maybe save that for tomorrow because I'm going to do an introduction. So Chafetz Chaim, this is one of the first sefers I read in yeshiva. And it's basically dealing with the spiritual technology of guarding one's speech. Right? Very important, right? Because as we know, Hashem started the word with speaking, right? When the light of reality came into the world, it came in, Vayomer Elohim Ve'ahior Ve'ahior, right? And God said, let there be light, right? Before that, the world was in darkness, the world was in tohu vuhu, the whole thing, right? So, so now we're introducing a spiritual technology of modifying the speech and using this restriction, right? You heard the Rob Berg, different people talk about this idea of restriction. What does it mean, restriction? Restriction means that I have a natural impulse. I have a perception. Now I have to align that with the Torah. So when I have an impulse and I have a desire that's not in line with the Torah, I have to stop myself. And when I stop myself, I create a vessel, right? In any area that I stop myself, I create a vessel. What happens with that vessel I create? God's able to bring the light. So speech, which is the basis of creating reality, when we control that and we allow God's light to be a part of our speaking process, right? Then we allow God to create for us, right? So if the world was, if the light was manifest through speech, that means we have the ability to manifest light through speech. But the way that because we are subservient to the Creator, right? We're not at the level of prophets, right? We're at a lower level than that. And so our thing is that what we need to do is to say, okay, well, I need to align my speech with the Creator's speech, right? So let me bring up the page. So we're going to learn a little bit of Chafetz Chaim, his introduction to the laws of Lashon Hara. Now we're going to spend a lot of time this month on refining this teachings from the Sefer, right? And the reason why it's so important, because the more we learn this, the more we create a protection shield through this process. And then from there, we continue to refine our character, right? Because this whole time is about refinement. All right, so it starts like this. This is Chafetz Chaim. I'm sorry for not giving such a great introduction on who he is and the masterpiece of this Sefer, but we're going to get there because we're going to spend a lot of time perfecting speech this month, because this is part of how we protect our families, protect ourselves, and allow the light to come in. So it says, Ahava Hashem, Yivarek et Amo Israel, Yifachetz me'od be'tovatam ad shekara ama b'shema b'enim. Okay, so he says in the Chafetz Chaim, be with us, join us in the shir. All the Siddiqim join us in the shir. May Abigail Batsar receive an aliyah from our learning. It's all in her merit. So he says, in the blessed ones, okay, in the blessed one's love for his people Israel, and his great desire for their good, to the point of calling them sons, and the portions of the Lord and inheritance, along with many other terms of affection, are shown, which show his great love for Israel. It says in Malachi, he says, I loved you, and said the Lord, he distanced himself from all forms of evil, especially of Lashon Hara and Richiut. We're going to see what that means in a second. I just want to make sure I'm saying it right. Hold on. It's so much easier it's crazy, like growing up in America, but it's easier for me to say words in Hebrew. So it's a richiut, yeah, richilut, richilut. Okay, so Lashon Hara and richilut. So what is Lashon Hara? What is richilut? So they now said this. So this aspect of Lashon Hara and richilut is this idea that doing this, Hashem separates himself from us. Okay, he says, for these which bring men to quarrel, to fight, and in contention, and which is very bad, which is very often can lead to the spilling of blood. As Rambam wrote in Hilkot, Diot, sorry. He says, and even when there is no malakot even though there's no makot for the transgression of this negative commandment, it is a great sin. So makot is like getting like lashes, like if you do certain things, you receive a couple lashes, 39 lashes, whatever, different things. So So anyways, so he says for this thing of evil speech and the likes, he says there's no lashes for it, but he says it's a great sin, which leads to the killing of many souls in Israel for a reason we do not go tale-bearing among our people. It says in Vayikra. He said, he says, it is followed by saying, do not stand idly by the blood of your brother, as evidence of a particular episode. And he says, Ve'od kama re'ot ma'asumot, ve'shana bu al yedei hamida mahamguna hazot. So he says, in some additions, he says some additional great evils are brought about from this despicable trait. He says it is well known that the sin of the primal serpent was brought about because of Lashon Hara, that it spoke against Hashem, the Holy One, blessed be He, to Eve. He says he, God, ate from this tree, the tree of knowledge, and created the world, by which Eve was instinct to do likewise, right? To follow God's will. The serpent was intimate with Eve and injected his zahama, his pollution into her. It's like this idea of her receiving not just the words but also the energy of the serpent, right? She received this energy into her, hence the sin of afflicted relations, and also death to mankind, hence the spilling of blood. And through this, the Lashon Hara, it was induced Adam and Eve to transgress the will of God. And it was followed by one who speaks Lashon Hara adopts the serpent's trait, which undermines the creation. So he's saying, in essence, that this concept of the first Lashon Hara that existed in human history was the Lashon Hara that we learned from the snake. And the serpent came into a perfect reality where we had everything that we needed and we were in a complete state of oneness. It was the Lashon Hara, the speaking of the serpent, that went against God's creation and made them feel like they were lacking something, that they were missing something, to the point that Eve completely transgressed God's will. And this led to bringing death into the world and destruction to humanity. He says, "Vegam sheikar simbat yiredat Israel lemitzrayim vehayata lekit kilia ad yadeze." So he says, in the distance. He says, in the distance of Israel into the descent. Sorry, the descent of Israel into Egypt too stem initially from this, from Lashon Hara. So them going into Egypt. How did they get into Egypt? He's saying by Lashon Hara. Where? In Bereshit, chapter 37, verse 2. And he says, and Joseph brought evil reports to them of the sons of Leah to their father. So this was the beginning of the whole process with Joseph's problems with his brothers, is that he would come and give evil speech about them and what they did. He says, and he says, evil reports to them, to their fathers, whence it was decreed by heavens, measured for measure. And he was sold into slavery. He says, Mita connected Mita. So what he did to them, it happened back to him. And that we need to worry about that too. We do things are going to come back. Please, God, save us. So he says to the Father, whence it was decreed by the heavens, measure for measure, that he be sold into slavery. His having accused them of calling their brothers from the maidservants, slaves. And he says, Bereshit Rabbah, and he says through Joseph had a heter. He says though Joseph had a heter, a halakhic license, for him to bring these reports, as the commentators explain, and it is noted that this heter did not avail him, and he was sold into slavery. So he's saying that he had such a relationship with his dad, and you saw his dad say, "Hey, go and see your brothers. Like, what are they doing?" Right? So he kind of had this relationship with Yaakov. The way Chafetz Chaim is bringing this is that he had a relationship with Yaakov, where it was kind of understood that he was the one recording. He said, but never, and he had permission to do this. It's like, imagine the chief rabbi says, hey, you know what? Go and tell me exactly what these people are doing. And he said, okay. And so you have permission from a rabbi to do that, right? Because he understands the situation, and they give you what they call a heter, right? A heter is like, permission that, okay, this is the way that this particular rabbi thinks that you should do it. He says, but nevertheless, even though he had that dynamic, even with that, the sin of Lashon Hara is so bad that even the universe did that heter that he received, it did not protect him. It did not protect him from the cause and effect, right? The karma, for lack of a better, karma is probably a better word, right? The karma that he received from speaking negative about his brothers. Ve'od kol siba gilu etenu atahu ha'ikar rach בשביל מעשה המרגלים וכמות הכיתוב. Okay, so he says, and again, the entire reason for our present exile is the sin of the spies. Oh man, he's just dropping this. And he says in Tehillim, he says they are mumard in the tents against the land. Mumard, I don't know. He says, and they hearken not to the word of the Lord, and he lifted up his hands in an oath against them to scatter them in the lands. And Rashi explains there, and as as Rambam wrote, he says Rashi explains, and as Rambam wrote, he says on Ben Bar Midbar, he says, and it stated in the Talmud that a sin of spies was essentially a lashon hara. So when the spies go into the land, right, and they give this particular report that did not allow that generation to enter the land, right? They all died in the desert, and then they went in, right, except for a couple. Right, and so this process was because they also spoke lashon hara. They spoke lashon hara, giving out evil reports of the land. They spoke lashon hara against the land. Right, so we're seeing a couple of different situations of lashon hara. Right, we're seeing that we see the lashon hara that was the serpent speaking against God. Right, that's one level of lashon. That's the first lashon hara. Then he brings another aspect, right, which is the exile of the Jewish people. How does exile happen? This exile started when Yosef started giving bad reports on his brothers, and then they went and paid him back. Right? They dealt harshly with him. Right? And then he's bringing another example, which is the lashon hara that the Jewish people spoke against the land of Israel. So one issue here, we hear about the listening to lashon hara, which is them listening to the serpent. The second aspect we're reading about is this idea of speaking lashon hara, but it's the truth. It wasn't like Yosef was lying on his brother. He's saying exactly how he saw it. And there's very deep things on that too, by the way. It's not just so cut and dry, right? But that's the lashon hara that we speak in a place of truth. And then now he brings another example, which is a lashon hara where people speak against the land, right? Something that's not even physical, right? Specifically here, the land of Israel. He says, because then on the eve of the 9th of Av, cry in vain, cry it on the 9th of Av, right? We got the 3 weeks, the time when the base of Migdash was destroyed. We start in the 17th of Tammuz, and then we got 3 weeks, and then we get to this apex moment, which is the 9th of Av, right? He says, on the 9th of Av was decreed for them as a crying for the generations. Why? Because the destruction of both temples happened around that time. And he says, and the countless other evils befall us because of this great sin. For all the sages of Israel who are kings, for all the sages of Israel who were killed by King Yaina, in the days of Shimon bin Shichat. He says, and the brother-in-law of King Yain. Yanina. So he says, and it's also killed because of the sin of Rikyut. All right, so we're going to learn more about what that means. The murder of the Tana, Rav Elazar Hamadi, which also contributed to the destruction of Beitar, which is a whole thing which is connected to this month. It was likely caused by Rikilut, which was spoken against him before Ben Kovoya. So he's bringing different sources of different things. He says, he says, Godel, Harot, Shenim, Tza'u, Bemida. So he says, and because of the gravity of the evil found in this evil trait, the Torah extorts us specifically against it by the negative commandment in Vayikra. Do not go tale-bearing amongst your people, as shall be explained below. And opposite to anger is cruelty and leviticity and other corrupted traits, which even though they undermine the majesty of the soul, and for it forms, and they were alluded to in many places in the Torah, as explained in the words of Chazal. With all of this, there is no explicit negative commandment against them, as there is no as there is against Rikilut. He says on the account of the 613 commandments in the Torah. He says ve'od nir'en pas. He says pasut ta'am acharei. So he says, and we shall learn another reason for the Torah's exonerating us explicitly against these lashon haras and rikilut. He says, for when we analyze them in truth, we find them to include almost all of the negative and positive commandments which obtain between a man and his neighbors, and many between a man and his maker, as we shall explain, God willing. It is for this reason that God extorts us these against these explicitly, so that we do not become enmeshed in this evil snare. I shall explain this with the help of the blessed be He. And he says, and from this there shall follow the incidents of great benefit via in many other halachot. And also perhaps because of this, the Yitzer will be smitten when the transgressor perceives the great havoc and harm wrought by his speech. And there I begin with the help, and here I begin with the help of him who grants the man knowledge. Okay, let's keep going. So he says umid kila serikeka li ledad hachalalim bekala kot me'elu ude leshan hara in richilut. And from here we must know the principles of the halakot of lashon hara. In Rikilut, Lashon Hara is speaking disparagingly against one friend, and Rikilut is telling one of the evil things that the friend has spoken against him or has done against him. Okay, the principle is it is Lashon Hara and Rikilut is forbidden, even if true, as explained below. Please God in the name of all the poskim, all the the judges. He says also the prohibition of Lashon Hara and Rikilut applies both in this object's presence and not in his presence. Also, there is no difference between speaking and receiving Lashon Hara and Rikilut. He says all of which we shall explain further. A receiver of Lashon Hara is one who believes in his heart that what has been told by his friend, even if it does not abide him in telling it, but only believes in his heart the Lashon Hara and Rikilut that he has heard. He says if he does believe it, he is called the bearer of false reports, transgressions. He says people coming to you telling you things about other people, you shouldn't believe it. You shouldn't believe it because if you believe it, that person shouldn't be saying that to you anyways. But by you believing it, you now become a part of it. And the Torah says in the book of Shemot, he says, do not bear false reports. All of these principles have roots and branches as in each and other part of the Torah. May the Lord grant that we know them comprehensively. Veda the damam shenikvo de over ben bali. He says, but belavin uvin ba'asim uvin. And he says, and know that whenever we write that he transgressed both the negative and positive commandments, and that the three curses attached to them, which we shall mention and allude to below. We're going to say it below. Or our intent is both Lashon Hara and Rikilut. And both, okay, so really quick, because he's saying a lot of things, and I just want to make sure we're clear, right? So there's two aspects we're talking about. We're talking about the concept of Lashon Hara, which is speaking negative about someone. Rikilut, okay, is telling one the evil thing his friend has spoken against him or done against him. So one area is saying like, you know what, this guy Deion Sanders, I don't like him. I don't like his kids. All this, blah 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 blah. You know, you're just speaking about them. I don't like the way he dresses. Blah blah. You're just saying it. That's just evil speech, right? I don't like this rabbi, or I don't like this. That's evil speech, right? Rikilut, he's saying like this is telling one the evil thing. So another thing is the Rikilut is going to someone and saying, hey, you know, so and so, bro, he was talking about you, he was talking about your family, he was talking about your business. I'm just letting you know, man. I'm not trying to say nothing. He says that's Rikilut, right? So he's saying, so he's speaking. So those are the two frames we're dealing with. So now he's saying in those negative or positive commandments, right? We have 248 positive, we have 365 negative, right? And so he says that those negative or positive commandments, which include all the modes I shall refer to in short in the Ber Miriam Chaim, as in all the 8 modes. Okay, he says that is Lashon Hara and Rikilut, in his presence or not in his presence, both the speaker and the receiver, and both if false or if true. Remember these things, for it will not reiterate them. Remember these, for I will not reiterate them in the introduction. Okay, so these are like big concepts, right? So we're starting a new adventure in our lives, and you guys may have learned this safer. I don't know. Maybe some people have learned this. We had to learn, but the point is, you could never learn this safer enough times because speech is so destructive, and we all fall victim at it at some time. Some people perfected this, and we should all perfect this, right? So it says, and this is the key to teaching too, by the way. Like the pure mouth, the words of the Torah just come out and have much more of an impact. He says umit kila na va'era kama lavin lavin lavin. Yeah. So he says lavin. So he says first we shall explain how the negative commandments one transgresses in the speaking of Lashon Hara and Rikilut, and then how many positive commandments, then how many curses he brings upon himself, and further, how great the prohibition it results from this. ואחלך את המפתיחה הזו לשניים. So he says, and this is the end part, and we're going to go to the portion. He says, I shall divide this instructions into 2 parts. The first is called Makor Chaim. A super commentary around it is called the Ber Mayim Chaim, the reasons for these names. So he's giving you the structure of this. I have given the preface. The reason why I've given this in preface, he says in the Bar Ma'im Chaim, he says Chaim, and he says it will be made clear to which mode each negative and positive commandment applies, along with some of the other halakot. This I begin with the help of him who grants us knowledge. Okay, so we're stopping here, and we're going to continue this a portion every day for the rest of the month. I don't know if we're going to read every single chapter, but we're going to read for sure a portion every day, and we're going to refine our speech. So before we go into this week's Torah portion, Any thoughts and reflections on what we talked about so far?
Shalom, shalom.
So,
I really appreciate this. This is great because it is something that, you know, I believe that we all have to always be guarded, watching out for. And like you said, I really you know, just desire to have that where you have that pure tongue to be able to share Hashem's Torah. And so this is really good. And Toda for the class.
beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, this is like this is where we're going, and this is the key thing too. This is the spiritual technology that protects us this month. You know what I'm saying? There's an emphasis, and we're going to see it in a second. We're going to see it in second of in the parsha Tazria, right? And we're gonna see Tazria, and we're gonna see everything about it. We're going to learn a little bit with Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs and blessed memory. He should also join us. We got Kafis Chaim with us today. We got Chief Rabbi Sachs. You know, we have the merit of Avigal Batsera. We just so many amazing things. We're getting closer to the new month. These are the last days of Nisan. Where just so many miracles. You guys are experiencing miracles. We're all experiencing miracles, and that's a big deal. You know what I mean? All
And
right, go
you know,
ahead. Go ahead, please.
uh, Shalom. I'll tell you what, something that stood out to me was the fact that when you talked about when Joseph, when he brought the bad report, that was evil speech.
Hmm.
And because I was when you were going through it, you came back and you said it. So even though it was true, you know, that makes me think about something my elders used to say. They used to say, if you don't have anything good to say, just don't say nothing at all. You
Exactly.
know, just don't say anything. Because even though it's true, it's still an evil report. It's still bad. And so that stood out to me. So that
Yeah, no problem. And we don't, and you don't want that type of karma. You know what I mean? Like you got enough stuff to deal with. You know what I mean? So, let's get back on here. But yeah, this is exactly what we're dealing with. You know what I mean? Hold on. But yeah, so this is a very powerful element. And the thing is, it's also as we're learning this to critique how we live in a society that celebrates gossip. They celebrate it. It's like gossip by them is like it's juicy. They got TV. They used to have. You remember that back in the day? They used to have magazines, Star Magazine, this gossip columnist, this blah blah. This is a part of normal discourse, and is completely forbidden by God. Right? Every culture would tell you that, right? Speaking negative about anyone is against God, and we live in a society that literally has TV shows. They have TMZ, not to give you guys hints, but all these different shows and gossip. I mean, gossip is, and how much of black media is based around gossip, right? How much of it? All the gossip columns. Those are in our communities, right? And it's completely against God, right? And so we do. It's important to make those connections, right? Because we got to see the world that we're living in. It's a dark world, right? Okay, so we're in Parsha Tazira, and we're going to see about it. So we're with Rabbi Sachs. We're still in this frame of leadership because the leadership we're building is getting closer to Matan Torah every single week, and this is part of our transformation. So we're in transformation. We're working on ourselves. We're working on these different attributes. So he brings us this. So he starts like this: the price of free speech. Ooh. So he says. So he says. There was a girl. Her name was Hannah Smith. She was 14-year-old schoolgirl who lived in the UK. He says, bright and outgoing, she enjoyed her active social life and seemed to have an exciting future ahead of her. On the morning of August 2nd, 2013, Hannah was found hanged in her bedroom. She had committed suicide. Wow, that's horrible. Seeking to unravel what happened, her family soon discovered that she had been the target of anonymous abusive posts on social media. Hannah was a victim of the latest variant of the oldest story in human history, the use of words as weapons by those seeking to inflict pain. The new version is called cyberbullying. Now, we all know how big of a deal this is, and a lot of things. Violence has happened, all types of things happen from cyberbullying. He says the Jewish phrase for this kind of behavior is called lashon hara, evil speech, about people that is negative and derogatory. This means quite simply speaking badly about people and is a subset of biblical commandments against spreading gossip. Despite the fact that it is not singled out in the Torah as a prohibition in its own right, the sages regard it as one of the one of the worst of all sins. They say astonishingly that it is bad that it is as bad as the three cardinal sins: idolatry, murder, and incest combined. Right. So the sages teach that evil speech is so bad. He says if you put idolatry, murder, and incest together, he says evil speech is worse than that. More significantly, in the context of Hannah Smith, they said it kills three people: the one who says it, the one who's the one who says it, the one it is said about, and the one who listens. Right. So it literally takes out three people all the time, all evil speech. The connection with Parashat Tazria is straightforward. Parashat Tazria in Metzora are about the conditions caused tarats, sometimes referred to as leprosy. The commentators are puzzled as to what the condition is and why it should be given such prominence in the Torah. They conclude that it was precisely because of the punishment of lashon hara, derogatory speech, evidence from the story of Miriam, who spoke scornfully about her brother Moshe because of the Cushite woman who he had married. And God himself felt bound to defend Moshe's honor and as a punishment turned Miriam's leprosy. Turned Mary gave Miriam leprosy as a punishment. Moses prayed to God to heal her, and he mitigated the punishment to 7 days, but not which annulled it entirely. Clearly, this was no minor act because Moshe singles it out among the teachings as he gives the next generation. He says in Deuteronomy, "Remember the Lord did to Miriam along the way you came out of Egypt." Now, it's a really important part of this too, because the Torah talks about when Miriam is sick, and she basically became ill because of lashon hara. So we're seeing here that all sicknesses start within, and then they reveal themselves physically. So the fact that she was speaking lashon hara was an aspect of impurity that was already inside of her for whatever reason. We're talking about a prophetess here, so it's not so clear to understand what was going on prior to her to even make her say that, for that to even come out, right? But the key thing is like this, and the sages teach this point: when Moshe is praying for his sister, he says a prayer, he sings a song. It means a song. It's El Na Rafanallah, right? El Na Rafanallah, El Na. So it's basically saying, heal her, please. Rafa, right? To heal her. God, please heal her, please. Heal her, please. So the sages deduce that it wasn't that he was talking about heal Miriam, Dafka Miriam. He was talking about the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah that is above Miriam was damaged because of her behavior, and because the Shekhinah was damaged, that light that she needed, she was not receiving, which ultimately led to this leprosy, right? Right, and so this is a very, very big part, because the person speaking lashon hara is usually not in a good place, right? And Miriam, we can't compare ourselves to Miriam, but still the principle is the same. Oddly enough, Moshe himself, according to the sages, so when someone is sick, always pray for their Shekhinah to be repaired, right? And you could go back in these chapters, I think in Deuteronomy 29, you can see the words, El Narafanallah, you can sing it too. A lot of times, I know a lot of Kabbalists, a lot of people, when people are sick, they sing this. They sing this song all together. So he says, not in Kabbalists, even regular people. Oddly enough, Moshe himself, according to the sages, had been briefly guilty of the same offense. At the burning bush, when God challenged him to lead the Jewish people, he replied, "They will not believe me." And God gave Moses three signs: water that turned into blood, staff that became a snake, and his hand that briefly turned with leprosy. He says we find references later in the narrative to the water turning to blood and the staff turning into a serpent, but none of the hand turning to leprosy. The sages, ever alert to this nuance of the Bible's text, say that the hand that turned leprosy was not a sign but a punishment. Mm. Moses was being reprimanded for casting doubt against the innocent by saying that the Israelites did not believe him, and they are believers, the children of believers. And said God, according to the Talmud, but in the end you will not believe. So that's a big deal. So this is another account, right, of Lashon Hara, right? And this is Lashon Hara of speaking about people's potential, right? And so they said, when he said these things that they won't listen to, he said God gave him three signs. One sign was that water turned to blood. The other sign was the staff turning into a serpent and turning back into a staff. And the third one was his hand becoming white, right, with leprosy. So he says that the first two, you see them, later on, right? You see these things happening, right? You see the plagues, the whole thing, right? So the thing is that, but you don't see anything about the leprosy with the body in this way with Moshe, right? So he said because the last one was a punishment. It was a punishment of speaking about other people's potential, right? And they're not this. What are you talking about? That's Lashon Hara. How dangerous, he says, how dangerous Lashon Hara can be is illustrated by the story of Yosef and his brothers. The Torah says that Yosef brought evil reports to his father about his brothers. This was only a provocation that led his brothers to plot to kill him and eventually sell him as a slave. And there were several other factors, but this derogatory gossip did not endear him to his siblings. No less, the disastrous was the evil report. The Torah uses the same word as it does in the case of Joseph. Back, he said, brought back by the spies. Oh, so he's in, when it comes to, he says, no less the disastrous was the evil report. No less disastrous was the evil report, right? And he says the same word for evil report was the same thing that was used by Joseph. It's debia, right? And so he says, brought back by the spies in the land of an inhabitants. It says in Numbers. Even after Moses' prayer for forgiveness, the report delayed entirely to the report. He said the report delayed entry to the land of Israel for almost 40 years and condemned the whole generation to die in the wilderness. He said, why is the Torah so severe about Lashon Hara, branding it as one of the worst sins? He said it has deep roots. This has deep roots in part in the Jewish understanding of God and the human condition. Judaism is less a religion of holy is less a religion of holy people in holy places than it is a religion of holy words. He says God created the universe along using words. And God said, let there be light, and there was. God revealed himself in words. He spoke to the patriarchs, the prophets, and at Mount Sinai to the whole nation. Our very humanity has to do with our ability to use language. The creation of Homo species is described in the Torah thus. Then the Lord God formed man from dust of the ground and breathed into the breath of life, and man became a living soul, right? So he says, the Lord formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into him his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living soul. which as we see earlier, the Targum renders, it's a commentary, that as a speaking soul. So they're referring to man as a speaking soul. The language is life. Words are creative, but also destructive. If good words, if good words are holy, then evil words are a desecration. He says one side. So if you're saying the words of the Torah are holy, so that means the words in hip hop are a desecration of God's words, right? Because they're not speaking in that way. We should pray for the elevation of the whole hip hop community to use holy words. He says one sign of how serious Judaism takes this prayer, we say at the end of every Amida, at least 3 times a day, God guard my tongue from evil speech and my lips from deceitful speech. To those who, he says, to those who curse me, and let my soul be silent. My soul, and may my soul be like to all like the dust, having prayed to God at the beginning to to at the beginning open my lips so that my mouth may declare your praise. We pray to him at the end to help us close our lips, and so that we do not speak badly about others or react when others speak badly of us. Despite everything, however, despite the Torah's prohibition of gossip, despite the stories of Yosef, Moshe, Miriam, and the spies, despite the unparalleled
Excuse me, cut out, Chief Rabbi. Cut out.
Whoa. Oh man, so it went out. Hold on. Oh man, what's going on? Hold on, let me go out and come back in and see if it fixes it. Anyways, I guess it went. I guess I don't know what to do. So I guess the last 4 or 5 minutes it went out, huh? Anyways, technical difficulties. Brook Hashem is live, so we still got the live recording. Let's end it here after running to another meeting, but we're going to continue on tomorrow, earlier time. Baruch atah Adonai.